sake, Ferric. Look what you've done. It would be disgraceful for me not to invite her now. Okay, it's decided. I'll take her in as your protege. Now we're going to make sure you're cleaned up and well fed. So smile.
Oh, what a great day! Greetings, Bucketheads! Mavar Tigar! Welcome to the 100th bucket blazing episode of Mandovision, Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small independent Star Wars podcast. We would not be at 100 episodes if it wasn't for every single one of you out there listening to this show and supporting us all the way. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And another friendly reminder to please make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, sharing the show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. It is so awesome that you do that. Truly, truly appreciate it. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, they do that rating stuff on there. 5-star ratings. They're so awesome. They help us spread the word about what small independent shows like us are doing. Let us stand out, not get lost in the shuffle of that terrible, terrible algorithm. Well, I mentioned at the top, we've made it. 100 episodes of the Mandovision podcast are now officially in the books. That doesn't count some of the little bonus shows that have been thrown in there in the mix, but still, 100 full-fledged dedicated episodes of a Star Wars podcast that I'm in charge of. Who would have thought? I don't know why I didn't do a Star Wars podcast from the moment I sat behind a microphone instead of, just doing a beer show and then like a regular old pop culture show. It's like, no, wait a second. Why didn't I do Star Wars at first? And the only answer I have to that question is I needed to get better at it. The beer show, the pop culture show, they were all practice for getting me to the point where I was comfortable enough to sit here by myself, no less, and talk about Star Wars with all you wonderful listeners. And I thank you all from the bottom of my heart so very, very much. I've received a couple of very nice messages about this, and we'll talk a little bit more about 100 at the end of the episode. Something special at the end of that at the end of the episode, I hope. And yeah, we'll talk more a little bit about that later. But we have business. I don't want to. I like to consider myself a fairly humble person, and as excited as I am about being in episode 100, I don't want to bask in the glory of it for too much, because we have work to do. We have a special episode, an exciting episode, where we're still continuing our work on Star Wars Visions. We're on the 8th entry into this Star Wars inspired Japanese anime. We're on the Lop Ochõ episode, and Ochõ. Oh, it's Ocho, right? I'm saying it right. I'm just confusing myself. I feel like I'm saying 8 in Spanish, and I'm not. I'm saying it correctly. I'm just tricking my brain's tricking me because I'm so overcome with emotion right now from the kindness of people who've reached out to me about episode 100. So yeah, I'm just, again, I'm a little emotional. So I thank you all so much for your kindness, and let's do the show. You know what that means? Well, hold on. Before we get into it, let me talk a little bit about Lop Ochõ, because this, from the trailer, this was probably the episode that I was most nervous about, and I don't really have a reason that makes much sense. I remember the little snippet, and we saw Lop in the trailer, and something about that was just like, I was like, I don't know about that particular episode. That's kind of a weird thing. And then I watched the episode, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it, by how much I got out of it. Uh, I think it's a really strong story. I think it's a really interesting starting point for further adventures with these characters, as really this is just sort of a table setting episode in a lot of senses. I don't know if that would be continued on in another season of Star Wars Visions if that comes to pass, or if this is just a fun one-off, and it'll be up to us in our imaginations to kind of continue the adventures of Lop and Ocho as well. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I don't have a good reason for being so nervous about going into it. Like I said, I saw that first glance of Lop in the trailer, and I don't know. It just seemed almost like it was going to be too anime. This episode might be too anime for me, and it's not the case. I was very happily wrong about my preconceived notion about something I had never seen before, and that's why you sit down and you watch it, folks, because I've been wrong about trailers and I've been right about trailers, but I still sit down and watch the flick to make sure I know what I'm talking about. And I just watched a terrible movie that had a terrible trailer, but we won't talk about that. That's a whole nother can of worms. But if I might let you know if you hit me up on the social media, and we can talk about it there. But you know what we got to do first? We're getting into this episode. We're talking about episode 8, Lop Ochõ. But it's it. But it's it. It's it. What is it? It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Papa, your stubborn opposition to development is just wrong. We need the Empire to provide growth and prosperity for our future.
We've lived a long time without any assistance from the Republic. Why would we need to change things now? Why throw ourselves at their feet? They continue their military buildup. But what happens if they turn this planet into a war zone? You want to lead this family? Then you should want to drive them out!
We're not looking at the bigger picture!
So much family drama to in this episode. My goodness gracious. Can't even be contained by these clips alone. We had to cut it short on that clip. They keep going for another 20, 30 seconds. My goodness. My goodness. This episode, again, we are on Star Wars Visions number 8, Lop and Ochõ. It's about 20 minutes long. As of this episode, or as I record this, this is about the 5th highest rated episode of the show. So, we're kind of beyond the halfway point. This seems to be in the lower half of the rated episodes, but still a strong 7.3 as far as overall performance amongst viewers, and that's a good thing. Our plot for the episode: a family is torn about what to do when the Empire encroaches on their planet. Our episode is directed by Yuki Igarashi, written by Yasumi Atarashi, and Sayawaka. I think I got that right. Sayawaka? Yeah, that looks right. I apologize if I am misspeaking anyone's names. That's never the intention. We want to give as much respect to all the creators involved in these shows as humanly possible. Our voice cast, the American voice cast for this episode: Anna Cathcart is Lop, Hiromi Dames is Ochõ, Paul Nagayuchi is Yasaburo, and that's kind of our main cast. We'll give Kyle McClarley some extra love because he's the kind of gross, slimy Imperial officer. He's really a character, right? That is I'm not sure that Imperial officer's haircut is Imperial regulation. I think he's kind of slipped through the cracks. There might be some oversight that needs to come into play and get that man's hair back under Imperial control. That's what has to happen there. If you will. So this episode, it's there's a lot going on in this episode. There's a lot of subtext here. It's not super hard to pick up on. I think we're all crafty enough, savvy enough to know what's going on with this story. The planet Tau, rich in resources, very attractive to the Empire, and the Empire makes promises of an industrial advancement in return for the occupation of the planet, and they essentially begin to strip mine the place. Lop, who is of the species, I guess their species is technically Lepus carnivorous, which is the same as the classic Star Wars comic book character Jackson, I think is how you more properly pronounce it, who's recently come back to promise under Kevin Scott over at IDW, bringing him back into play. Let me talk about Jackson real quick, because for a long time that character was made fun of in comic book media, in comic book outlets. Like, they were like, Jackson, a giant green space bunny, was in the Star Wars comics when Marvel had the license back in 77, 78. And now look at Jackson. Back into the limelight, has his own action figure now, and has a really talented writer as one of his biggest advocates. So, go Jackson, right? Go Jackson. Jackson. I don't have to ask Kevin Scott how exactly you want to say it. Jackson, or whatever. He's a cool space rabbit. He's green, and I have his action figures right behind me. You can't see that though because this is an audio podcast. But anyways, that's the species that Lop is from, and they make up the Empire's forced labor force, slave labor force on the planet Tau. Lop escapes and is running free through the streets. Trying to get food wherever she can. She has her little TD droid with her, and eventually they stumble across Boss Yasaburo and his daughter Ochõ. And Ochõ quickly decides that Lop is cool and should join their family, and she'll never have to starve again because Boss Yasaburo takes care of his people. He takes care of the planet, and he seems to have reluctantly agreed to allow the Empire to be on the planet. And he doesn't. That's why he sort of applauds Lop for escaping when they first come across her. But he has no intention of inviting her into the family. He just was like, going to let her get some food and whatever and then call it a day. But it's Ochõ who insists on bringing Lop, this runaway slave from the Empire, into the family, into the fold. And that's exactly how it happens. And Yasaburo comes around and accepts that. And again, we see the beginning of this sort of forged family. My only real question in this sequence is, she's got the TD droid with her, right? The entire time. TD's there the entire time. As she's jumping from the rooftops and, having the food with her. And he's there the entire time. But it's not until Yasaburo says, yeah, come and join our family, that TD cuts the neck collar off of her. If that droid could do that the entire time, what's going on here? It seems like TD was like just waiting for the okay from someone with some power to let Lop loose. And I don't know, that was a little weird, but just again a tiniest of quibbles in this episode. Now we fast forward 7 years, and Boss Yasaburo is much more unhappy with the Imperial occupation of his planet. The planet's getting polluted, it's getting destroyed, the environment's falling apart, and he's sick of it. He's had enough, and in Imperial eyes, he has become a terrorist. In his people's eyes, he's a freedom fighter. He's trying to end their occupation, trying to drive them off the planet, to bring their planet back to life, to preserve their resources. This puts him into direct opposition with his daughter Ochõ, his natural daughter Ochõ, who sees the benefits, who wants her planet, who wants Tau to become part of the galaxy, wants them to sort of join the Empire on the forefront. Get that technological development, get those advancements that are going to make them, the next course on, or what have you, as far as that goes. She's willing to sacrifice the natural beauty and their resources to achieve that goal. But Yasaburo is no longer interested in doing that. He wants the Empire out. He makes the reference in that clip how they didn't do this when the Republic was there. Why should they bend over with the bend over backwards to accommodate the Empire? So you start to get that struggle between the family dynamic. Who's right, who's wrong. Obviously, we side against the Empire in this podcast. I can't speak for other shows, but we side against the Empire on this particular podcast. So we are in favor of Boss Yasaburo. But Ochõ is possibly as stubborn as her father, which is something that we don't get to explore quite as much as maybe we would like in this episode, because she's all in on the Empire, and that sleazy Imperial officer makes her an offer that she can't refuse, because she was supposed to dissuade her father from his attack against the refinery, against the mining operations, what have you. It's looking more of a refinery to me. I don't think they really distinguish necessarily what it is. An interesting note, you may notice the 3 dots on Boss Yasaburo's outfit and a lot of the other workers who are part of the Yasaburo clan. The same symbol from the Kurosawa film Yojimbo. So that's pretty exciting, right? Pretty good stuff. Lop, on the other hand, has sided with her adopted father. She has come to love the planet Tau and wants to protect it and preserve it from the Empire. Granted, you would also think she has more hard feelings towards the Empire than Ochõ does. She doesn't know. She hasn't been oppressed or enforced into slavery like Lop was. So Ochõ seems to have a sort of rose-colored glasses view of the Empire, and is more looking at growth and advancement and those possibilities, no matter what the sacrifice might be. So it's interesting to get this family dynamic pitted against each other, because that's not something we've seen a ton of in Star Wars proper. You've gotten at some of the expanded universe stuff in some of the books and some of the other forms of media, but by and large in the films, it's not like Skywalker pitted against Skywalker or anything like that, unless you're counting Anakin and Luke, but that's a little bit different. It's not just they have a philosophical difference, but until Empire, we didn't know they were part of the same family. This time around, like, this is very clear from the beginning, and it's there's this forged adopted family being torn apart by the biological parts of it. The father, the natural father, and that to the natural daughter, tearing it apart. The adopted daughter is the one who steps forward to side with the father and help bring about what he wants to see happen for the planet, to preserve it, to save it from this exploitation that the Empire is committing against it.
This ritual has been passed down in our family for generations. Hundreds of years ago now, there was a great warrior called a Jedi who came to this planet and died here. But first, he entrusted this treasured sword to our ancestor. Through his teachings, this ancestor was taught how to wield the blade. And ever since, both it and those techniques have been passed down for generations.
So that clip obviously takes place after Ocho has sided with the Empire, gone off, left her family, abandoned her adopted sister and her biological father to side with the Empire, to see Tau achieve this technological advancement, to take its place in the Empire as one of the primary worlds of it. And Lop has had to go back to her father and report this. And he makes the decision to pass on the ancient sword that they have inherited from a deceased Jedi Knight, Jedi Master even. And that sequence is full of so much evocative Star Wars imagery that up to this point, really, with the exception of Stormtroopers and that big impressive Star Destroyer that opened the episode, there hasn't been a lot of Star Wars imagery in this particular episode to this point, other than the Empire. But this episode, like many of the others, we focus on the lightsaber, the sacredness of the Jedi weapon, and what it means to the people who wield it, and its importance, its symbology to the people, to the culture. And again, it's reflected in this sort of samurai story. We're getting another sort of samurai take on the Star Wars myth, and the sacredness of the sword, the sacredness of the samurai sword, the sacredness of the lightsaber. It's all right there. This time it's being interpreted very differently than we've seen in some of the prior episodes. But that sacredness, that importance of the sword, that honor that the sword carries, its sort of lineage and its legacy is played up in this episode very strongly. And I really, really enjoyed that particular aspect of it. And I think by this point in Visions, I also really enjoyed that we got an episode that was a bit less of the Star Wars homages and sort of the sort of direct Star Wars influence. This tale, yes, you could figure out a place that this fits into Star Wars continuity, into Star Wars canon if you wanted to, but you don't have to. That's not required. That's not part of its enjoyment. Yes, there's familiarity with the Empire and Imperial occupation. So yes, it's sometime between episode 3, and it could be sometime between episode 3, at the end of episode 3 and the end of episode 6. The Empire is taking over planets left and right. So yes, you could find a spot for this in canon if you wanted to, though I still sort of enjoy the idea of these being outside of canon so we can kind of tell more creative storytelling. And it would also allow for that slimy Imperial officer to have that crazy wackadoo hairstyle that he has. And I kind of appreciate that aspect of it. The importance of the lightsaber, obviously, again, another theme from many of the other episodes prior to this one, not unique to the samurai stories or the influences that it has on Star Wars. So you get to see that here again. It's a really nice touch. And what even more so, when the final confrontation comes to be, when Yasaburo takes his people and engages in another act of aggression against the Empire, another act of rebellion against the Empire, and Ocho springs into action to stop her father directly, when Lop intervenes and fires up the lightsaber, and her reaction to that, which I think we'll probably play at the very end of the episode because it's pretty good. You can sort of see that despite Ocho's decisions to abandon her family, she never thought she was out of her family, that she'd been replaced as the heir to Yasaburo, to Clan Yasaburo. So that's an interesting take, and let alone for it to be to her adopted sister, who she now seems to be rejecting because she's not blood. Yet her father has more embraced because she's not blood, but she is, in a sense, a true Yasaburo, in the sense that she is a true Jedi in that sense, and that she is looking to defend the innocent, protect the planet against these aggressors, against evil and the dark side. So it's a really strong episode. There's a lot. I love the interplay between Ocho and her father, Ocho and Lop, and everyone's reaction to each other. Everyone's sort of, I guess reaction is the word I'll stay with on that. But the way they react, the way they sort of have to process their feelings in the fight. Lop does not want to harm her sister, but she does some damage to her at the end of the episode, to drive her off to end the conflict. But the episode ends in such an not necessarily ambiguous way, like the Empire's leaving this planet behind and there'll be no repercussions, but you get the look, the feel from Ocho staring at Lop with such, I don't know if hate is the right word, but such anger and fury at sort of like with this perceived betrayal from Lop and obviously her biological father by giving Lop the family sword, the family lightsaber. I really like this episode. I think there's some fun stuff in here, and then again that reveal when Lop engages the lightsaber to protect Boss Yasaburo, her adopted father, from Yasaburo's biological daughter. It's just a really great moment, and this is another episode that has a really unique musical element to it, and I think that plays really nicely into our themes, into the family dynamic, and into the sort of Star Wars-esque action sequences in this one. It's a really nice piece. My reading of some of the reviews on this episode, not as much overt negativity as I've seen in some of the other reviews for other episodes in Visions. I think a lot of people like me were rather surprised how much we liked this one. A lot of us are also kind of interested in getting more of this story in some fashion or another. Thus far, we've only gotten a continuation of the Ronin story from the Duel episode, the very first one that kicked off Visions. But you have to be curious at this point. Do the other stories in Visions merit continuation? Because again, very very many of them are sort of setting the table for more stories down the road. Whether those were to happen in a continuation of the Visions, animation series in a season 2 or a season 3, we don't know yet. Or do you continue it, through comics or through manga comic books even? I know, would it be unreasonable for a Star Wars manga line to pop up like through IDW or Marvel at this point to sort of continue some of these storylines that have been seeded in some of these episodes? Because this episode, Lop and Ocho, much like The Village Bride, we sort of want to know more. We want to follow these characters a little bit further and kind of see where this goes. And The Ninth Jedi, another one that just really sets the table for more adventures in another iteration of the Star Wars universe. So I'm curious to see if they want to follow that up. I want to go back because, like I said, the sequence where Yasaburo is presenting the lightsaber to Lop. Again, it's so wonderful. It's so well done. The music beneath it and what he's saying to Lop is so interesting that I want to go ahead and play kind of the rest of that sequence. So let's check it out.
This ancient weapon represents the bond between parent and child in our family. As it is bestowed upon you, remember that even though we are not bound by blood, you and I share a strong connection. I am your father, and that bond cannot be broken. We'll support each other for as long as we are able to. Bear this in mind, and keep this sword close to your heart.
So in that sequence, we get a fairly unique iteration of I am your father in Star Wars, but a very different meaning, very different context, and even subtextually speaking, very, very different from the classic I am your father that we get from Vader in Empire. And a nice little moment with his adopted daughter that I think is very touching and something that I I'm not going to go down that road. You almost got me to go down that road, and I'm not going to do it. I almost started talking about a topic that's kind of off limits on this podcast because it brings out the dark side in me. So no, no, no. We'll just have to talk about that another day when we're in a safer place. But yeah, I love this. I love this story. The adopted daughter being embraced by the father, and oh, it's just good. It's really good. This is there's a lot of touching emotional moments, a lot of heart in this episode, and I think it's hard to sort of skip that, to ignore the family element in this particular episode. Just so enjoyable. I really, really enjoyed this one. Even though, like I said, it's a longer one. It's like, again, 20 minutes. It's still shorter than an episode of Clone Wars or Bad Batch or Rebels. But sometimes, when you got a lot going on, 20 minutes is a lot. Not in this episode, not in this case. Easy 20 minutes right here. Now I'm going to go ahead. I want to cut in the little bit when Ochõ is going to make the killing blow against her father, who's laid on the floor, and Lop springs into action because I dig it so much. Here we go. Check it out.
That's the family sword. What are you doing with that? I'm the successor!
I passed it on to Lop. Inheritance has nothing to do with blood. There is so much that matters more.
Don't be ridiculous. I won't allow it!
Okay, we'll stop it right there because that's a pretty good taste of things to come right there. And again, this episode, we talked a bit about it in The Elder, how the lightsaber sort of had almost like a cutlass-esque, shape to it from The Elder. This episode, the lightsaber, much more in line with sort of the classic samurai katana blade. And that's pretty obvious in this encounter. It's a very strange weapon that Ocho's wielding. It's like this 3-level kind of nunchuck thing, but with force energy, not like the force, but some kind of energy binding it, connecting it together. If that is a practical weapon, I do not know its name. I apologize. I am not the most sophisticated when it comes to weapons of the martial arts. But still, an intimidating weapon, and it still seems to hold up well against the lightsaber, so you got to give it credit for that. But yeah, a great sequence there, especially as, again, Yasaburo's laying sort of sprawled out and talking about how inheritance has nothing to do with blood. Again, really strong stuff in that sequence, in that dialogue. And yeah, a really important message about the ties that bind, the blood that pumps in our veins, and who we're connected to, who we're related to, and how maybe it doesn't matter in the long run, as long as we're a good person, right? That's all that seems to be what we're trying to say. And again, you're making me want to think about talking about something, but I'm not going to talk about it. All right, so let's wrap this one up because that is basically the end of Lop Ochõ. It ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, sort of ambiguous, sort of vague. What's to come next? Will there be future installments? We can only wait and see. I kind of hope there is. Again, I'd love to see IDW launch a Japanese manga line of Star Wars Visions and sort of continue these stories in comic book form. If they weren't to continue them as animes in another season of Visions, which I don't think we've gotten a word about just yet. But that November Disney shareholders thing is coming up soon, and I'm sure we'll get some clarity on the future of Visions then. So we'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, here we are. That's the end of the episode, proper as you will. But I did want to take another moment to sort of just thank everybody who's been a part of the 100 episodes of Mandovision that we have done. It's been a lot of fun. I sort of kicked myself for not doing a Star Wars podcast sooner. But I think it worked out for the best. I've become a much better podcast host over the years, doing the other shows that I've been a part of, or done with other guests and guest hosts and co-hosts. This show works really nicely on my own because I'm kind of able to talk about. I guess it's Star Wars, and I'm just in my comfort zone, and I'm just so happy to be here and talk to people about Star Wars stuff, and to find such a wonderful, warm, receptive audience out there has been a true gift, and I can't thank all of you enough for taking the time every single week to download, listen, share the show on social media. And none more so than a listener who's been here since day one, and I couldn't thank this person enough. He goes by the handle, his Twitter handle is @ruralfarmboy, and he is a fantastic, dedicated, awesome listener and a friend of this podcast. I've only gotten to know this person through social media, but just a kind, generous person. He sent me an incredibly wonderful, incredibly kind voice message, and I did think about including it in the episode, but I hadn't gotten permission yet as we're recording this, so I didn't want to do that without the A-OK. So if I get that later on, we'll include it in another episode. But I wanted to give my personal thanks to Rural Farm Boy for being there from day one and sort of welcoming me to Star Wars podcasting and Star Wars Twitter in a lot of senses. And I'm not the world's best Twitter person, if you will, but it's always fun to log on and find a message or a retweet or something from Rural Farm Boy. So I truly, truly appreciate that. Just an incredible listener of Star Wars podcasts, and if he is listening to your Star Wars podcast, you got a good one on your hands. Good listener and a good podcast. So it works in a lot of different ways, and again, not to single out just him because there's a lot of amazing listeners for this podcast, but he sent me an incredibly touching message that got me a little emotional before the episode, and I wanted to give him a special shout out and special thanks. And if I get permission, I will include that in the episode before we publish in a couple days. So yes, Rural Farm Boy, thank you so much for always being here, always being so kind and supportive, and just an awesome person, an awesome Star Wars fan. And may the Force be with you, my friend. Thank you so much. All right, enough of that Jedi language. Let's get out of here with that. We wear buckets on this podcast. We don't have time for Jedi nonsense. We got one more episode of Star Wars Visions to talk about, and we're gonna close it out. And the episode that closes out Visions is a interesting one. We got a few things to talk about with that one, and we'll be back very, very soon to do just that. So again, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This has been 100 amazing episodes. Amazing for me knowing that so many people are listening and enthusiastic about what I'm putting out there for your consumption. So I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will be here for at least 100 more, maybe 1,000 more. You probably can't stop me at this point. And I don't want to stop. Never. Never. All right, let's go. Let's get out of here. You know what that means. This podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
This is the way.